Hola, hola, ¿cómo está? Welcome to Melanie Spanish class.
Yo, if your answer is yo, that's okay. I was being really picky and I said, no, but it's going out as ustedes, right? So we answered.
Hello everyone, I am hanging out here with Ian Rowe. He's a Spanish teacher here in the US, and I just got done watching his Spanish class. And so we can say hello to my students.
Hello, how are you?
And Ian, what's the biggest challenge that you have making your students speak Spanish?
The hardest part is to get over that fear of making a mistake and to sounding silly, maybe in front of your friends, especially if your friend speaks, everybody speaks English very well, so to try to speak Spanish, it makes them very nervous, and nobody wants to make a mistake and sounds, may have their friends laugh at them. And so when it's somebody you know pretty well, like a good friend sitting next to you, it's tough to want to do that. But if you move around and you talk to somebody new and you don't know that person very well, then usually a little more serious. But that's the hardest part, is to get them to want to speak it.
Yeah, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Yeah, and that's the same thing with our students in China. But I'm surprised that that's the same thing here in the U.S. too. You think they're more confident to speak out.
It's the same. Yeah, in class today we said keep making new mistakes, and so that's really important, is to make the mistake and maybe get a little giggle and maybe you say the wrong word, and then take note of what that mistake was, and then maybe the next time when you come across that word again or wanting to say a certain thing, you don't make the mistake, because either you made the mistake or you heard somebody else, and everybody is supportive of each other, then that's good.
So a lot of students sometimes say they don't like English or like learning the language. How do you encourage your students to learn another language?
So yeah, it's similar here for us with Spanish in San Jose in California. It's a very common language, and so you would think that everybody would want to learn it, but again, it's with all the other subjects. They realize that it's more than just learning a couple words. That learning Spanish is pretty hard to make sense when you speak it. So the similarity of if you're in China learning English to if you're in California trying to learn Spanish or Chinese. But in this case, Spanish is the same. It seems obvious that, to me, to the teachers, that this is something that will help you very much, that, if you want to be a nurse, that to know Spanish is important. So the challenge is definitely there to get that motivation. But in terms of what we try to do to get kids motivated, is to remind them how useful it is, that it's a long process to get really comfortable, to not give up early on, and things we do at the school. We take trips once a year. We travel to a Spanish-speaking country.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and we try to do things, projects where they can do videos, and Spanish 3 just did a YouTube video, or a video that is on YouTube that is like a news program with different news from the school, so things happening on campus, sports, etc.
Yeah,
so we try to get kids interested in Spanish that way.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So anything you recommend to my students to learn English better?
Right, so it's just like learning Spanish here in China, learning English, I'm sure it's very important. And so to learn it better, what I recommend for my Spanish students is to take what we do in class and then go home, and I say talk to your teddy bear, talk to your dog or your cat or your family member, even if they don't speak in China, even if they don't speak English, just say things in English, practice what you were doing. Definitely practicing outside of class time is huge. The students here who don't speak any Spanish at home, but with their families usually, but that will go home and practice it, tend to do the best because they're saying the word a lot and not just writing it down. A lot of students here can write down or copy vocabulary, or they can do a matching activity or something, even read a little bit and do it quietly. But
Do they read out loud? Do you make your students sometimes read sentences out loud?
Yeah,
or?
sometimes, yeah. In big classes, it's tough, but at least maybe once a day, somebody reads something out loud.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a job that they're in charge of reading the bulletin or the agenda for the day, and that's in Spanish. And so just to keep practicing it out loud. That's at home with somebody who either does or doesn't speak Spanish in our case, or English in China. But the other would be to find a friend that you can make this a fun activity. When I learned Spanish, there weren't many kids that spoke Spanish in the school, and so it felt like we knew a language that nobody else really did. And even if it wasn't right, it was just continuing to practice it and use whatever we were doing, made it kind of this unique, cool thing. And then slowly but surely, it gets better and easier, and then you start thinking in that language, and you start understanding what people are talking about.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm curious about how long it takes for a student to learn Spanish or learn a new language in your school. Have you ever done some research, kind of an average amount of time? How long do you think does it take from a student that doesn't really speak any Spanish? And then after how long do you think you saw a student really improve? After how long?
If their effort level is high in the first couple of years, and they go through chapters of a book that are different topics, they can become fairly fluent within that topic fairly quickly. An example in Spanish 1 would be if we're talking about what foods do you eat at different meals. It's not that they're going to learn every single food there is in the world, but if there are 30 different things, ice cream and bacon and chicken and things like that, and then they can make a sentence that says, for breakfast I eat this, and for lunch I don't like to eat that. Then when they go and they talk about, at a party and somebody speaks Spanish and they're serving food, they would know how to say, oh, I like chicken, but I don't like beef. And they could feel like they understand. In that context, they can make a few statements that gives them confidence in that. And so then when we go through the year and we talk about family members, or we talk about where we like to go on the weekends in the mall or the movie theater or something like that, then they can start to put that together. So after 4 months in class, they're saying things that we practice today, like the date and the time, of course, but then things like what class they have 5th period, what is the teacher like, what do you need for the class, things like that. And so that's an area where they're talking about their school day, and then they talk about their food, the food they like to eat, and then they keep building that. So to become fluent, it's always a tricky one to put a finger on. I mean, kids do go through the 4 years here and approach fluency, and then it's usually it's what happens after high school. That's our concern, that we want to see that they continue it, maybe go study in another country for a summer. That's what I did. And then just meet friends and meet people your age, and then continue to study the language.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow, great. Okay, Ian, well, thanks a lot for all your tips, and I hope my Chinese students can also learn something from you. And thanks a lot for helping out my nephew and my niece.
Yeah.
I heard you're a great teacher as well. So, okay,
right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Adios, amigos.
Joy Jin. Wait. Let's all say Joy Jin on.
Joy Jin. See you next time.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Joy Jin.
You want to film that or no?
Yeah.
All right.
Can you say something about English to my students? Can you say, English is a piece of cake, or speaking English is really not that difficult?
All right.
Okay.
All right. So English is lit. English is lit. 1, 2, 3. English is lit. Joy Jin.
Joy Jin. Okay, thank you.
All right. Good job, guys.